Is Walter Clayton Jr. Payton Pritchard 2.0? And what other big-name collegiate stars does Walt resemble? Find out next on Locked On Jazz.
You are Locked On Jazz, your daily podcast on the Utah Jazz. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into Locked On Jazz. I'm Leif Thulin, and I'm excited to be with you guys, filling in for David Locke on Locked On Jazz. As most of you guys know by now, I'm a lifelong Jazz fan, credentialed NBA analyst, attendee of the 2023 and 2024 NBA Combine, Jazz broadcast assistant, and statistician, and lover of college hoops. So I'll make sure you guys know what you need to know about your beloved Utah Jazz. Thanks for making Locked On Jazz your first listen each and every day. Remember, Locked On Jazz is free and available on all platforms, including YouTube at Locked On Jazz. But the best way to help us grow is to comment anything below. Today's question is, what do you think of the best comparison is for Walter Clayton Jr.? And is it one of the ones I'm going to tell you about? Or are these all just because they're, older guards in college that have done some things in the NBA? This episode is brought to you by Monarch Money. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNBA at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. Today on the show, I'll examine the comparison with Payton Pritchard and other smaller guards drafted with similar qualifications in college as Walter Clayton Jr. And that'll tell us what's in store for Walt, or will it? That's up to the eye of the beholder. So let's dive right in. Walter Clayton Jr. was drafted by the same guy, Austin Ainge, that was accredited for drafting Payton Pritchard. And in my mind, Ainge was angling to reproduce that pick. Like, as soon as that pick was made, I thought, wow, I think he's trying to recreate the wheel and take Payton Pritchard. And maybe he's trying to follow his father's footsteps, and Ace Bailey is essentially the Tatum that preceded Payton Pritchard by a couple of years. Now, the question becomes, how similar are the pair of All-American first-rounders that played 4 years of college ball? These everydayers will recognize this exercise I'm about to do of comparing each step of the career for Walter Clayton Jr. to that of Payton Pritchard and all the other guards for the same drill that I did to examine how favorably Ace Bailey compared to Michael Porter Jr., Brandon Ingram, Brandon Miller, Paul George, and Kevin Durant. So with Walt, let's start with Pritchard. Similarly built. They're both stockier in build, not very tall. Walt is 6'2" according to the combine, and Pritchard at 6'1". Walt's like 5 pounds heavier than Pritchard. Pritchard was a point guard more at Oregon, and Pritchard, the point guard for the Celtics, was drafted 26th overall in the 2020 draft, and he's known for his ability to shoot the ball. And he's a 4-year starter and a consensus first-team All-American his senior year. Clayton was also a 4-year starter for the most part. He came in midway through his first season at Iona, but he had a more circuitous path at Iona, then finishing raising a banner as the star for the Gators. Pritchard was a highly recruited guy and played on a team that made the Final Four his freshman year and was a starter. Pritchard's senior year was the one that won him All-American honors. He was 20.5 points per game, 5.5 assists, 4 boards, 47% from the field, 41.5 from three, 82 from the line. I saw him play Oregon at Utah. Man, he was a complete floor general. You knew that he was the best player on the court the second he stepped on. He's an All-American first-team Pac-12 Player of the Year. And that's very similar to what Walter Clayton Jr. was. 18.3, 4 assists, 4 boards, 45, 39, 88 splits, SEC first team, All-American first team, most outstanding player, national champion. That's pretty similar. So let's just call that a wash. Pritchard was a touted recruit and started all 4 years. Clayton took the path to Iona under Pitino, played the 2 guard for 3 of his 4 years of college basketball. So that's a slight dissimilarity. And he also started only 4 games at Iona as a freshman. He averaged 7 in 16 minutes at Iona. Year 2, I listed Clayton as the best shooter in the country on a podcast with Isaac Shade of Locked On College Basketball. We were supposed to build our perfect player, and the guy I created as the shooter was Walter Clayton Jr. because his year 2 stats were 17 a game, 4 boards, 3 assists, 46 from the field, 43 from 3, and 95 from the line. I thought that was deserving of the best shooter in the country announcement. The guy I took this year was Kobe Bryant. I would stand on that one too. Usually I'll say there's a lot of good ones, but no, like that was pretty obvious to me. Year 3 was the first one with the Gators, and he was the 2 guard. Zion Pullen, who's on the Memphis G League team, was the point guard, and they battled for all conference with one another. He scored 18 points, 4 boards, nearly 3 assists, 43% from the field, 37 from 3, 88 from the line. And then there's a moment where you say, okay, he needs to acclimate a little bit to SEC play from playing at Iona. But in big moments, time and time again, he stepped up. And that was very true in this last season where they won the national championship. He had crazy shots against Colorado, against Cody Williams' Colorado team. Colorado won that game, but Walter Clayton Jr. was stealing the show and was amazing. Like I said, Pritchard's senior year was very, very good. Walter Clayton Jr.'s senior year, that's pretty similar. Their statistics pretty similar throughout their careers. Pritchard, not quite the accomplished scorer that Clayton was, but that said, he was more of a ball handler. Clayton was more of a scorer early in their career. But let's go to the film. So those are the statistics. Let's go to the film. The film has told me from both my memory of watching Payton Pritchard, but also revisiting it. He was a more in control point guard than Walt, but their ability off the dribble shooting was exceptional. And I'd even lean towards Walt as being better as a shooter and a scorer than what Pritchard was. And that's what Pritchard's made a living doing in the NBA. So that bodes well. Pritchard, to me, had more experience at the 1 entering college and also entering the NBA than Walt, which I think helped him maybe assure teams of ability to stabilize their offense in their second unit. But what he's done in Boston offensively is something that I think Walt can do from the scoring perspective in terms of he can stretch the floor, shoot the ball off the dribble, which is a really big weapon. Like off the dribble threes are potent. He's a career 9-point per game scorer, 45 from the field, 40 from 3, 86 from the line. But what we can be encouraged by is in years 1 through 4, he was under 10 a game, and he still played 19 minutes a game, but became better each year, just like he did in college. And that trajectory to 6th man of the year that he just won is attainable for Walt, unlike the crazy expectations to be a star in day 1 that I've heard some Jazz fans say. I believe in Walt as a future point guard starter, but it's a possibility that it's closer to this path as, he's going to have the ball in his hands in a second unit, but his job's more to score than to initiate and create for others. And I think his biggest growth area is that initiation. I've talked about this before. The valve that he had in Alex Condon being someone who really was the catalyst for Florida's offense, they played through a big, was something that Payton Pritchard did not have. And I think it made me more confident about Pritchard's possibility to be a point guard than Clayton. That said, Clayton's a better shooter than Pritchard, in my opinion. And I think he'll be able to be an offensive plus so much so that it'll be a valuable piece off the bench. And Pritchard, you list him as a point guard due to his size, but he's almost become a 2 in the NBA. And especially with the team he plays on, with so many guards that can handle the ball, and they stagger it all, and those guys are the initiator. He's the beneficiary of their attention and knocks down open shots. And with that background of point guard, I think it helped him ease into a role that meant he had less stress. Whereas Walter Clayton Jr., if he stays at the 1 in the NBA, barring the Jazz getting some enormous guard to run the show, it makes him have to learn the point guard. But I do think there's a world where the Jazz, take the ball out of his hands a little bit and use his shooting to place him as a scorer and a shooter to complement a very talented player and stagger much like Payton Pritchard. I do think this is the model for the Jazz. Payton Pritchard has become a fantastic NBA player. If Walter Clayton Jr. is Payton Pritchard or even close to that, the Jazz have hit the lottery at 18. Like, that's plain and simple. I think this is a good comparison. I think through every level of basketball, they've had similar paths. But I do think that Pritchard was more able initially in his career to run the point than I believe Clayton will be. I think there's going to be growing pains, and there's also going to be growing pains of how do I create my shot if I'm the guy with the ball in my hands and our team's not particularly good and we don't have advantages. Because I watched him struggle a little bit with creating space in the in the summer league against G.G. Jackson, who blocked a shot from like 27 feet away playing off. I think there's going to be growing pains, maybe more than what was experienced by Pritchard, who came in with pretty efficient shooting. And, they were in the playoffs, so his minutes were leverage minutes. And I think that actually really helped him for be prepared for what he is now. All right, coming up next, I'm going to talk about two more NBA champions, much like Payton Pritchard, to whom Walter Clayton Jr. has drawn comparisons, and what coaches said about him while he was in college. All that and more straight ahead on Locked On Jazz. Most people can't name their financial accounts or even what they're worth, whether it's 401ks, properties, or investments. And when you don't have the full picture, you can end up leaving money on the table. That's why there's Monarch Money. It's an all in one personal finance tool that brings your entire financial life together in one clean, easy to use interface on your laptop or on your phone. Monarch does the heavy lifting for you. You can link all your accounts in minutes, see clear data visuals, get smart categorization of your spending, and finally feel in control of your family without ever touching a spreadsheet. So if you guys have subscriptions and you may have forgotten you paid for them and what they're about, I mean, I certainly encourage looking at that. For example, I linked all my accounts to Monarch and immediately spotted a few subscriptions I wasn't even using. I haven't used Hulu in years, and I've forgotten all about that, and Monarch helped point that out to me. So canceling those alone saved me money each and every month. So don't let financial opportunities slip through the cracks. Use code LOCKEDONNBA at monarchmoney.com in your browser for half off last year. That's 50% off your first year at Monarch Money with code LOCKEDONNBA. Welcome back to Locked On Jazz. Leif Thulin with you here. So there are two stars he was frequently compared to in the college game, especially as his rise to power, the precipitous rise in the SEC tournament into the national championship game. He was often compared to a few players. So I'm going to tell you about a couple he was compared to from coaches I really respect. And of course, they know more about him and game planning for him than I do. So one of them was the following: the unanimous MVP of 2016, Steph Curry. By the way, I'm going to say something controversial here. LeBron should have won MVP that year, even though he was unanimous. That said, I digress. And the other one is Fred VanVleet. I do not see the trajectory of Steph, and so I just want to stop and pump the brakes there. But there is serious credence to the following quotes. So this is from Kevin Willard, the coach of Maryland, now at Villanova. He says, he reminds me of Steph a little bit of how good he is off the dribble. He said that in preparation to play the Gators in the Sweet 16. And then Walter Clayton Jr.'s coach, who is a savant, and he's precocious, Todd Golden, said, from a college version, I think it's applicable to say he's similar to Steph. And Golden was at San Francisco for years during the peak of Curry, and he's familiar with Curry, and he was there from 19 to 22, saw Steph win championships. And then he continues on to say, his off-the-balance shooting, his ability to get his shot off at different times, and just his confidence to let it fly from deep. I think those things are very similar to Steph. And then I would say this. They certainly have similar builds. Clayton is about 6'2" without shoes, 6'3" with shoes, 195. Curry checks in at 6'2", 185. I think Steph's put on some more muscle than that, and I think he's probably 6'3". I'm just reading through these, sifting through. They both shoot extremely well on the move, a skill Curry has often said is the toughest to master, and neither seems concerned that any look is out of range. So that's an excerpt from his coach. And that isn't the star I'd actually compare him to, but he does shoot it so well that it's not the most ridiculous comparison. So, and how well does he shoot the ball, you might ask? So not only am I a little geeky like numbers, David likes numbers. Here's one from Kevin Willard, the coach of Maryland, and in talking about preparing for Walter Clayton Jr., he uses these analytics to show how rare of a shooter Walter Clayton Jr. is. He shoots the basketball going left 48%, and then he shoots it going right at like 38%, he says. Then he says, we get a scouting report done by Sports Analytics Advantage, and he grades better than any player they've ever had analytically shooting the basketball off the dribble going right, and he's even better going off the dribble to the left, which is preferred by righties typically, and he sets the record in that too. So his numbers, especially for college in that regard, were staggering. And, it's crazy thinking that he shoots it better going left, and he probably does it more frequently, because all those big shots he hit in the tournament, he hit 2 against UConn on the right side. He hit another one against Houston in the championship. He hit big ones in big moments against Texas Tech. Those were going to the right. And I thought that's so atypical, because NBA players talk about this all the time. Right-handed shooters would rather step back to their left because the ball goes across their body. As opposed to going to the right, you just have to have such strength to square your shoulders and get it going towards the direction you want. Very, very difficult, nuanced stuff. But I think it's so impressive that these numbers support what we saw. He can really, really shoot off the dribble. And like I said, that is a potent weapon, one that Damian Lillard and Stephen Curry have exploited for years and that everyone's been trying to replicate. I remember seeing him at Iona, not understanding why he was there, not as a slight to Iona, but why was he not elsewhere and why was he not playing high major basketball? Because, like I said, he was the best shooter in the country that year. It was staggering. And then he goes to the SEC and he's all SEC. So he was ready for that. His shooting is going to be good in the NBA. That's the point of that. And then the hottest coach in college hoops the last few years is Danny Hurley. And Hurley said Clayton and his quick release remind him of Fred VanVleet rather than Steph. And Todd Golden, his coach again, also says he sees a little Jalen Brunson in Clayton. He elaborated and said because of his ability to handle the ball, but get off the ball, get it back, and be a playmaker and a decision maker. I don't necessarily see the guile that Brunson has with Clayton, but I do think that all these coaches need to be taken seriously when singing praises to Walter Clayton Jr. So these are all fantastic, and I don't disagree with any of the praise heaped upon him. But let's explore the Fred VanVleet comp a little further because I don't want to go through the Steph one. Fred was the 2-time player of the year in the Missouri Valley and was an All-American as a sophomore. That was an excellent Wichita State team. Year 1, he scored 3 per game in the NBA. Year 2, he scored. He was the 6th man of the year he was the 6th man of the year, 3rd place in year 2. He scored 9 points, 2 rebounds, 3 assists, 43% from the field, 41 from 3, 83 from the line. And then year 3, he was a part-time starter for the first time. The reason I point that out is I think that's a trajectory that actually might be more likely than Jazz fans are pleased to hear about. And he scored 11 points, 5 assists, 3 boards, 41% from the field, 38 from 3, 84 from the line on year 3. The difference between Fred and Walt, though, when you watch him play, like if you were to watch film, is Fred guards. Like he guards his yard in a very, very, very impressive way. And so much so, he and Kyle Lowry, neither of whom are fantastic athletes, and they're certainly small, formed a defensively stout duo at just 6 feet tall against NBA competition as champions. Like they did this to make their team championship contenders. And I don't see that for Walter Clayton Jr. as he was the worst defender, most inept defender on a national championship team in college. Whereas Fred VanVleet has been one of the more well-regarded perimeter defenders from the point guard position in the NBA at one point. So there's a difference to me. But what do you guys think about that comparison? And I know I read you some quotes and didn't give my own analysis. I mean, I don't think he's going to be Steph Curry. That's nothing crazy to say. But I do think the point about how dynamic of a shooter he is really important to understand and to give credence to the idea of like Payton Pritchard has made his name by being a very good shooter, being someone who can use the threat of his shooting to then score or use his speed if he gets a switch to step back and shoot threes. Like his shot making is his calling card. And I would say Walter Clayton Jr. is a better shooter than Payton Pritchard. And Payton Pritchard's like a career 40% NBA three-point shooter. I don't know if Payton Pritchard and Walter Clayton Jr. are going to have identical careers. I think the scoring, the 14 a game, would be icing on the cake. I think Pritchard was more able to be a point guard sooner in the NBA. But I think Walter Clayton Jr. is going to have the ability to have the ball in his hands early enough in his career to learn. Sometimes the ball is not in your hands. You don't get enough playing time and you don't learn at the same rate that's necessary for your abilities to accelerate. And I think he'll have every opportunity to do just that. So let me know what you guys think about those comparisons. Those are some stars and some champions that we've compared Walt to. But let's explore some more statistically similar players that were stars in the college game coming your way next. Let me tell you about Intercap Lending. It's one of the most fantastic companies that we work with. They're one of the largest independent lending companies. They're superbly responsive. They embrace change, and they've continued to see these changes and excel. They have so many amazing testimonials of excellent borrower experience, and they're a direct issuer operating in 44 states, not just in Utah. They give you that small town feel because they treat you so well. However, they're dynamic, doing things prolifically in 44 states, not just in Utah. So service your own loan, long-term relationships that are things you can build easily with intercap lending, and it's better for the consumer. That's you. So it's better for you guys. And we got the guy, Steve Carter. He's our personal loan officer at Locked On Jazz. So tell him you listen to Locked On Jazz. Call him at 385-800-8528 and make sure you tell him that you listen to Locked On Jazz to get the corporate discount. Intercap Lending, NMLS number 190465. For more information, visit intercaplending.com. Welcome back to Locked On Jazz. Leif Thulin with you here. The last two Walter Clayton Jr. comps are ones that statistically came to my mind based on their collegiate careers, but also have some similarities in play style. They're a little bit different. So one is Trey Burke, and that one, it's going to kind of leave a sour taste in your mouth probably, but it's more about what they did in college. And there's Marcus Sasser, who's a late first-round pick recently. And I guess I got another one. How about Ty Jerome? He fits it as well. Late first-round pick, someone who's been an all-conference guy, and then has had a circuitous path to, I wouldn't say stardom, but prominence in the NBA. So let's start with Trey Burke. For the record, didn't love the pick, and I rarely do like the picks that rise through tournament success to heights like Burke did, and that applies to Clayton as well, because I think it puts a spotlight that changes the assessment of too many players, too many evaluators. That said, there are some that have been fantastic, DiVincenzo being one of them recently. And I think Clayton Jr., the more I think about this and who he's compared to and the track records of these guys, I'm more optimistic about than I was when the pick happened. That could be me being a homer. But Burke was an All-American Player of the Year. He averaged 19 points, 3 boards, nearly 7 assists, 46% from the field, 38% from 3, 80% from the line. And he had an amazing season. No ifs, ands, or buts. He had an amazing season. And he led his team to the finals where they fell short against Rick Pitino in Louisville. And then Trey Burke was picked 9th by the Jazz via trade. It was Shabazz Muhammad. I digress. Actually, due to the Jazz having a vacancy at the point guard spot and kind of just lacking a direction that was clear-cut at that point, he actually had every opportunity to be the man, and that opportunity was given to him to be a star and have the ball in his hands, and he had numerically had very, very good rookie season. He finished 3rd in the Rookie of the Year voting using the stats of 12.8 points per game, 3 boards, 5.7 assists, 38% from the field, 33 from 3, and 90 from the line. So Burke kind of had the welcome to the NBA in the sense of running a team is difficult. He averaged almost 7 assists in college basketball. Then he had almost 6 assists in the NBA. But what I mean by that, it's running a team is difficult when trying to do what you have done your whole life and is your best attribute is shoot the cover off the ball and create for yourself and then use that to create for others. And that just didn't work as well in the NBA. His efficiency suffered, and his career started to tail off shortly after. In year 3 is really when it tailed off. After 2 years of high volume, both times scoring 12.8 per game, he had a high usage rate, shot plenty of shots, and he didn't start in a game for the next 2 years. So year 3 was with the Jazz. By year 4, he was on a second team, and that was with the Wizards. And neither team were particularly good that he was on during those years. Like the Jazz started to improve in year 3, and that was when they went away from him. That was Dante Exum was given a try after tearing his ACL up, and he was still given the chance and took over. That 4th year in Washington, he was not prolific whatsoever, didn't get a start. And then he got a few starts, but more out of necessity the years after that. So him, to me, he's a cautionary tale for small guards with deficiencies defensively, and he's not a great orchestrator, meaning it's scary to bet on tournament success. Walt is more able to score in more ways than Burke was, and to me, even a better shooter. But Burke popped into my mind on draft night when the Jazz drafted Walter Clayton Jr. Like it popped in my head. I didn't mean it to, but it did. So now let's go to the more recent draft picks that were highly regarded point guards that were taken late in the first round. One being Marcus Sasser and the other Ty Jerome. Sasser was awesome at Houston, earning his way to an All-American season. His senior year after his junior year, he likely would have been an All-American, but it was halted after 12 games by injury. He was selected 25th overall and scored 8 points per game as a rookie, and that was on what was a bad Pistons team, shooting just 7 shots per game in 19 minutes. That's pretty similar to what I projected for Clayton. I'll pull those up momentarily. The difference between Sasser and Clayton is Sasser played for Houston and was a hound on defense. And he still shot it well for the Pistons, just like he did throughout his collegiate career. He shot it well to the tune of 43% from the field, 38 from three, 88 from the line. Year 2, this past season, he played a little less frequently due to the Pistons getting better. But stats-wise and role-wise, I see similarities between Clayton and Sasser and how they project forward. The other day, when I did rookie previews, I projected Walter Clayton Jr. 6.5 points per game, and that rises month by month as the season goes, and about 22 minutes per game. That's fairly similar. I think Clayton might even get a bigger shot to handle the ball more than Marcus Sasser did. In fact, I would predict he does. So that one checks out to me. Now let's go to Ty Jerome, whom I absolutely adore. I love Ty Jerome. He shoots a floater, and anyone who knows me has played basketball. The floater is my favorite shot in basketball, and he's the best floater shooter in the NBA. Maybe with the exception of Steph Curry, but you know what? He's unbelievable. So Ty Jerome, 2-time All-ACC, never a All-American, but in my mind, he was super underappreciated because he was running what was a blocker mover offense where they played extremely slowly. They ran pin downs. For those who don't know what a blocker mover is, it's running what many call sides. The Jazz run this action sometimes, and they send a pin down, the big slips, and the guard flies around and shoots a three. It was Kyle Guy who shot a ton of those. But he averaged 14 and 6 on super slow pace and is a true floor general, and he can really, really shoot it much like Walter Clayton Jr. to the tune of 44% from the field, 40 from three, 74 from the free throw line, and he was a national champion just like Walt. He was drafted 24th, and he was a junior in that year as opposed to a senior. The trio of Kyle Guy, DeAndre Hunter, and Ty Jerome all left after that year. And his career started slowly because he was plagued by injury. Year 2, he was given some run in 31 games of action, and he scored 11 per game for the Thunder on a god-awful OKC team. And he shot under 9 shots per game, meaning he was pretty efficient in doing so. So now you fast forward a couple years to this past season. He was the 6th man of the year, 3rd-place finisher, falling behind that of Payton Pritchard, who won it, on a very, very good Cleveland Cavaliers team. And he scored 13 points, 2 boards, 3 assists, 52% from the field, 44% from three. Man, can he shoot it, and 87 from the free throw line on just 9 shots. So he shot 9 shots in the 2 most successful seasons, and he scored in double digits in both of them. One of them was on a terrible team, a bottom dweller, and one of them was the number 1 team in the East, and he made a run for the 6th man of the year. There were games where he took over for stretches and was the best player on the court. Like, this is really, really impressive, and I think the reason this is important is he's efficient. He runs the team, and I can see Walt inhabit that role for the Jazz as a steady backup to do what becomes the Jazz point guard of the futures. You know, like if the Jazz were to get a Ja Morant, he could do what Tyus Jones did for Ja. If the Jazz were to get a guy even like Darius Garland, Ty Jerome was able to stop. He would come in and you wouldn't lose anything. You may have a different flow to the game. It may not be as dynamic, but he's extremely steady. And he has some skills that are extremely prolific. Like, you don't shoot off the dribble and catch and shoot like Ty Jerome. Walter Clayton Jr. provides that as well. Ty Jerome's a more natural ball handler than Walter Clayton Jr., and he's a little bigger, so it makes him better in defensive things, but he's injury prone and not particularly swift of foot. So he too will be attacked. Walter Clayton Jr., biggest things he's got to work on, I've said this time and time again, I think he's got to become competent defensively, and he needs to just be thrust into the fire and say, okay, handle the basketball against the pressure. All these rookie guards have to handle it at some point. He just needs initiation by fire. And I think Walter Clayton Jr., after evaluating these players that he's similar to both statistically and build and collegiate pedigree, I think there's a pathway for him to follow the success of all of these guys except for probably the Steph Currys of the world. So let me know what you guys think. It was a fun exercise to go through and see what these projections look like compared to what these former All-Americans and current All-Stars or NBA champions have turned out to be. So thank you guys for making Locked On Jazz your first listen today. For your second listen, find the Locked On podcast, Locked On NBA podcast, where there's no offseason. Doug, Matt, and Hayes keep you up to date on contract negotiations, rumors, and everything you need to be the most informed NBA fan. Find Locked On NBA on YouTube, wherever you listen to your podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you guys as always, and I'll be back with you again with more Locked On Jazz later this week.